He wielded her clan's sword to protect her. But destiny had bigger plans. The last thing Connor Graves expected from a diplomatic escort mission was to get married. He wasn't even supposed to step off the shuttle. The surface of Nerith Prime shimmered like obsidian under its dying sun, the heat radiating off the violet sands in waves. From orbit, it looked like a scarred gem, beautiful, ancient, and on the edge of fracture. For the human diplomatic corps, it was a delicate alliance. For Connor, it was a paycheck and 2 weeks of babysitting pencil pushers while they signed papers with six-eyed nobility and drank wine that tasted like salt and sulfur. The capital city, Virakai, loomed in the distance, all spires and metal bones jutting into the sky like forgotten ruins, somehow still alive. The Nerethians were matriarchal, secretive, and prideful to a fault. Most humans found them unsettling. Connor found them intriguing, especially the way they walked like they owned gravity. But none of that mattered now. The dust storm that kicked up mid-landing forced their shuttle to divert, grounding them half a click from the city. While the diplomats grumbled and activated translation drones, Connor scanned the horizon. His HUD flickered against his retinas, feeding him updates, heat signatures, motion, wind patterns, and something else, a ripple, like distant thunder or drums. He motioned to the junior lieutenant. "Keep them inside. I'm going to take a look." "Sir, that's against—" "Not asking." He set out alone, boots sinking slightly into the violet sand, his armor still dusty from the orbital hangar. The storm hadn't hit full yet, but it carried voices, low, rhythmic chants that pulsed in the air like a heartbeat. Within minutes, the wind parted, revealing a shallow canyon carved into the stone. Below, torches flickered. Dozens, no, hundreds, of violet-skinned Nerethians stood in a ring. It was a ceremony, a duel. He crouched low behind a jagged outcrop, adjusting his helmet's magnification. Two figures circled in the arena below, both in form-fitting battle garb laced with ceremonial silver. One male, one female. Their blades gleamed like liquid moonlight, etched with symbols that danced as they moved. The man was massive, four-armed, with a cruel grin and 6 jagged horns down his spine. The woman, Connor's breath caught. She was injured. Blood, dark blue and glistening, streaked her side. Her left arm trembled and her foot dragged slightly on each pivot, yet she moved with the grace of a dancer. Fierce, unyielding. The crowd chanted a name. Kalira, Kalira, Kalira. He didn't know the language, but her name was unmistakable. The male's blade lashed forward, too fast to follow. Sparks flew. She blocked barely. He spun and struck again, hammering down on her weakened defense. She stumbled, then fell. Silence. Connor tensed as the man, Drasek, judging by the crowd, lifted his sword above her heart. She was finished. No one moved to stop it. No one screamed. So he did. He slid down the slope without thinking, boots skidding over gravel. A few heads turned. Gasps rose. His instincts screamed at him, but training took over. The moment Drasek's blade descended, Connor crossed the final steps, dropped to one knee, and clang! His fingers closed around the fallen sword beside Kalira's hand. A rush of warmth shot up his arm like static electricity. The metal vibrated, not just with impact, but with something deeper. It hummed. Alive. He parried the blow cleanly. Drasek's eyes, 4 of them, widened. "You dare?" the alien snarled in accented English. Connor's lips curled into a smirk. "You were about to murder a downed opponent. That's not a fight. That's cowardice." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A dozen armored figures stepped forward, cloaks billowing. One, an elder with glowing silver tattoos and no visible eyes, raised a staff. "The blade has been claimed," he announced, voice amplified by some kind of harmonic resonance that bypassed translation devices entirely. Everyone heard it in their own tongue. "By sacred law, he who wields the matriarchal sword in defense of its bearer shall be bound in union to the line of fire and light." Connor blinked. "Wait. What?" Kalira groaned behind him. "You idiot," she muttered. "I just saved your life. You just proposed marriage in the most binding way possible." Oh. They didn't give him time to run. Before Connor could even process what he'd stepped into, he was surrounded, escorted, politely but firmly, to the inner sanctum of Kalira's ancestral keep. Massive stone walls wrapped around an ancient city, half buried in the cliffs, glowing softly with veins of blue ore that pulsed in rhythm to unseen drums. It was beautiful. And very much like a trap, Kalira walked beside him, favoring one leg but otherwise upright and composed. Her voice was low, curt. "Stop looking around like a tourist. I just committed accidental marriage. Forgive me for gawking." She ignored the sarcasm. "You picked up the blade of Eldara. That sword was passed down through 15 matriarchs of House Sauron. It only responds to bloodlines deemed compatible, spiritually, genetically, and by ancestral resonance." "Ancestral what now?" "It liked you." He swallowed. "So, now what?" "You're my husband." They stopped before a massive set of double doors, carved with interlocking symbols that shimmered under his gaze. Guards stepped aside. Inside, a circular chamber opened into a dome that showed the stars beyond. 7 elders stood on elevated platforms, each radiating age, power, and suspicion. Kalira bowed. "I bring the foreigner. The blade has spoken." The central elder stepped forward, female, taller than Kalira, with glowing lines running from her eyes to her collarbone like molten silver. She studied Connor with an unreadable expression. "Human, do you understand what you have done? I understand that I stopped a man from killing her. You did more. The blade does not bond without consent. It chose you. You are now part of House Sauron, by law older than your species." "I'm flattered, I think." One of the male elders scowled. "This is an abomination. He knows nothing of our ways." "And yet the blade chose," the central elder countered. "You may question the prophecy. You may question the stars, but you will not question the blade." Kalira glanced sideways at him. "You're not backing out, are you?" He exhaled slowly. "I was just supposed to guard bureaucrats. Now I'm some kind of sword husband." "You can leave," she said coldly. "But if you do, Drasek claims my house, my lands, my name, everything." He looked at her. Really looked. Beneath the defiance, the pride, the royal posture, there was fear. And something else. Hope buried deep. He wasn't sure why, but it hit him harder than any battlefield trauma ever had. "I stay," he said. That night he was given chambers carved into the mountain, stocked with strange but familiar comforts. Heat, hydration, clean linens. Kalira visited briefly. "I won't share a bed with you, not yet. I wasn't asking." "Good." She turned to leave but paused. "Tomorrow you begin the trials." "What trials?" "To prove yourself as my consort. Otherwise the marriage is null and my house forfeited." "What happens if I fail?" "You lose your hand. I lose everything else." "Perfect." Connor didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, tracking the veins of glowing ore as they pulsed like a heartbeat. He had come to this planet to protect others, and now somehow his presence was the last thing standing between a proud warrior woman and the destruction of her bloodline. He didn't know their customs. He didn't know their history. He didn't even know her favorite color. But when he'd picked up that sword, something inside it had recognized something inside him. And maybe, just maybe, this was where he was meant to be. Connor Graves didn't dream that night. Or if he did, the dreams were smothered under the weight of the mountains and the expectations now pinned to his shoulders. When he opened his eyes, the light was dim and pulsing faintly through the seams in the stone wall, as if the very rock was breathing. A soft chime rang near the door, melodic, ancient, and he sat up. Kalira didn't wait for permission. She entered in full training gear, her posture as rigid as the ceremonial blade at her hip. Her skin, violet like the dusk sky, shimmered slightly under the room's ambient glow. Connor noticed the bandages on her side had been changed, but she still moved like someone used to ignoring pain. "You're late," she said simply. "I wasn't aware I had a schedule." "You do now." Connor swung his legs over the edge of the sleeping platform. "What's first? Sword drills, battle meditation, alien tax law?" She didn't smile. "The trials begin at dusk. You get 1 day to prepare." "That's generous." She met his eyes. "It's not generosity, it's mercy. You're expected to fail. I'm expected to fall. If we do, House Saren dies. So no pressure. No, no pressure. They walked in silence down the stone halls, past robed servants and armored guards who eyed him with cautious curiosity, some with open disdain. Kalira led him into a vast chamber bathed in golden light. The walls were lined with weapon racks and holographic memory totems, glowing blue stones that pulsed with whispering voices as they passed. Training Hall, she said, also called the Hall of Second Chances. Many warriors come here after defeat. Few come back stronger. Seems fitting. Kalira turned, finally breaking her rigid tone. Look, I didn't ask for this, but I can't undo it, and neither can you. You picked up the blade. You became my mate by law. Now you have to become my ally by fire. Fire? Trial 2. He blinked. There are categories? She nodded. 3. Body, mind, flame. The first is physical combat. The second is strategic knowledge and memory trials. The third is different. Different how? You'll see. The next 12 hours blurred into one punishing sequence of drills, data absorption, psychic pressure, and unrelenting alien etiquette. Connor was no stranger to hard training. Earth's Special Operations Division had ground that into him over a decade ago. But this was something else. Nerethian combat was fluid, weightless, almost dance-like. Their techniques favored precise strikes, joint manipulation, and using momentum over brute force. He was bigger than most of their warriors, stronger, but that didn't matter if he couldn't touch them. Kalira sparred with him personally. She didn't hold back. Every blow she struck was a lesson. Every time he dropped his stance, she swept his legs. Every time he overextended, she punished him with a strike that rang against his armor. Her words were clipped, her patience thin. You move like stone, because you're fighting like water. Then learn to redirect. They clashed again. Stop aiming where I am. Aim where I will be. Maybe tell me where that is. Don't talk. Move. By midday, Connor was soaked in sweat, arms trembling, lungs burning. Kalira tossed him a cloth and sat across from him on a low bench carved from solid crystal. You're not completely useless, she said. Your instincts are good, but instinct won't be enough. Won't have time to become a sword master by sunset. No, but maybe you can become something else. What's that? Unexpected. They didn't speak again until the ceremonial summons came. 2 armored guards escorted them to the ritual arena, the same sunken battleground where he'd first intervened. This time the crowd was even larger. The stone seats overflowed with nobles, warriors, scholars. There were even human observers now. Diplomats, translators, and one grim-faced general who nodded faintly at Connor as they passed. Kalira wore her formal armor, deep maroon plates etched with silver flame sigils, layered over a skin-tight black mesh that shimmered with energy. Her hair, usually tied back, now flowed in ceremonial braids adorned with tiny bones. Connor wore a simplified version of the same, crafted hastily by house artisans to accommodate his frame. He felt like an imposter in it, a man playing a role he hadn't earned. But as the horn sounded and the elders stepped forward to speak, he found his feet steady. The grip of his training blade felt natural, and Kalira stood beside him, tall and fierce. We call the trial of worthiness, announced the High Elder. First, the trial of body. Let the chosen warrior of House Quran step forth. A ripple passed through the crowd as a tall, armored Nerethian male approached. Not Drasek, but someone larger, older, a veteran. He is called Maroon of the 9 Blades, Kalira murmured. He has never lost in ceremonial combat. Any other good news? He prefers to incapacitate rather than kill. Consider it. The crowd parted. Maroon stepped into the arena, bowed to the elders, and then turned to Connor. I do not wish to harm you, he said softly, but you should not be here. Connor nodded. You're probably right. And then the horns blew. Maroon moved like lightning. Connor barely got his blade up in time to deflect the first strike. The force rattled his arms. Maroon followed with a spinning slash that should have opened his chest, but Connor dropped, rolled, and came up behind him. He didn't attack. He waited. Kalira's voice echoed in his mind. Be unpredictable. Maroon came again, faster. Connor blocked twice, then let the third strike glance off his shoulder in order to slam his knee into the warrior's side. The crowd gasped. They didn't expect human brutality. Maroon reeled, but didn't falter. He turned, switched grips, and disarmed Connor in a blur of movement. Connor fell back. The blade clattered across the arena. Maroon raised his sword, paused, and waited, giving him a moment to yield. Connor didn't. He lunged for the drop blade, caught it mid-roll, and whipped it upward into a low arc that forced Maroon back a step. Now they were both breathing hard. Connor's cuts ached. Maroon's left arm hung a little too stiff, and then Connor smiled. He faked left, rolled right, caught Maroon by the waist and slammed him to the stone. The arena roared. Maroon lay stunned for only a moment before lifting both hands in the gesture of surrender. The trial of body was won. The trial of mind was less glamorous. Connor stood before a panel of elders, hands clasped behind his back, as holograms flickered before him. Maps of disputed borders, historical treaties, lineage codes. The questions came fast. Name the fourth daughter of House Vel who brokered the Five-Fire Accord. Identify the failed clause in the Assyrian Compact. Recite the flame poem of renewal. Kalira had drilled him the night before. Rapid-fire memory games and mnemonic codes. He didn't answer every question perfectly, but he didn't freeze. He didn't flinch. He thought like a soldier, reasoned like a survivor. At the end, the elders nodded once. Trial 2 passed, and then came the third. The trial of flame. It took place not in the arena, nor the chamber of law, but deep beneath the mountain, in a sanctum known only as the Ember Crypt. Only bonded pairs were allowed to enter. Kalira walked beside him, silent, torchlight reflecting in her eyes. "What's down there?" he asked. "The blade," she said simply, "and your truth." They descended a spiral stair cut from obsidian, the walls etched with thousands of names. Ancestors, warriors, consorts, matriarchs. The farther they went, the warmer it became. Not uncomfortably, but like stepping into memory. At the base, a single altar awaited. Upon it lay the blade of Eldara, still glowing, still alive. "The trial is simple," Kalira said. "Touch it. See what it shows you." Connor stepped forward, heart pounding. When his fingers closed around the hilt, the world shattered. He stood in darkness, floating, weightless. All around him, stars flared and died. Voices whispered in languages he didn't know, but somehow understood. And then, images. Memories not his own. A woman in silver armor leading a charge. A man with Connor's face holding a child with violet eyes. Kalira, younger, weeping over a burning banner. A throne room crumbling. A sword falling. A spark igniting. He saw fire, blood, hope, and then stillness. A voice, old and soft, spoke inside him. "You were not born to us, but you carry the fire we lost. The line remembers. The blade remembers. You are the unwritten name." And then, nothing. Connor opened his eyes, gasping. Kalira knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder. "You were out for minutes." He blinked. "Felt longer." "What did you see?" "Everything, and nothing." "That's the right answer." The blade still glowed in his hand. Stronger now, brighter. The fire accepted him. That evening, as the trials concluded and the elders pronounced him worthy, the ceremony commenced. The crowds were smaller, more intimate. Kalira stood beside him, eyes soft now, armor traded for a ceremonial robe that shimmered like the stars. Connor wore the blade at his hip, not borrowed, his. When the final words were spoken, when the symbols burned into the air above them, sealing their bond not just in law, but in spirit, Kalira looked at him differently. No longer as a stranger, not even as a partner, but as something more. And when she leaned in, hand resting lightly on his chest, she whispered, "You were supposed to be a mistake." Connor smiled. "I still might be, but you're my mistake now." The stars over Nerith Prime burned violet that night. From the balcony of House Saren's ancestral fortress, Connor Graves watched the twin moons cast their mirrored glow across the ridgelines like a pair of unblinking eyes. Below, the city pulsed with quiet activity. Distant torchlight shimmered through the mist. Somewhere far beneath the stone, miners extracted energy-rich ore in silence. Somewhere beyond the mountains, armies stirred. Kalira stood beside him, barefoot, wrapped in a dark robe lined with silver stitching. Her hair was loose again, the ceremonial braids undone. She held a small glass of something that steamed faintly in the cool air. They hadn't spoken since the trials ended. Connor glanced at her, then back to the horizon. You know, on Earth, we usually celebrate surviving a gauntlet with a beer and a bad decision. Her lips curled into something like a smile. This is Zeth tea. It's older than your homeworld's governments. Brewed to honor blood that endures. He accepted a cup. It tasted sharp and slightly metallic, but not unpleasant. So, what now? Kalira sipped. Now we see if your body was strong, your mind sharp, and your soul accepted. Because of you, or because of us. That sounds ominous. It is. She set her cup aside and faced him fully. The night wind teased her silver hair across her cheek. Her expression was unreadable, calm but distant. There's a final test, Connor, she said. One not required by law, but demanded by tradition. Another trial? She nodded. The trial of the chosen mate. Sounds intimate. It is. He waited, watching her closely. You can say no. She arched an eyebrow. I could, but the high matrons wouldn't. They think I'm still a liability. They think you're a wild card, she corrected. You survived the official trials. Impressive. But this isn't about skill or strength. This is about trust, intuition, compatibility. Connor folded his arms. So how does this work? Kalira exhaled. We must travel to the Ember Grove. It's a pilgrimage site, sacred to bonded pairs. You must enter with me. If we are accepted as true mates by the ancestors, the grove will open its heart. And if we're not, then the grove closes. And everything we've built together begins to unravel. The next morning, they left before sunrise. They traveled light, 2 rations packs, a flask of nutrient serum, cloaks to ward off the mountain winds. No guards, no advisors. Just the 2 of them, walking side by side through the narrow paths carved into the obsidian cliffs. The further they went, the more alien the world became. Jagged spires rose from the earth like frozen lightning. Stone bridges arched impossibly across canyons. Bioluminescent vines pulsed in rhythm with unseen heartbeats. Strange creatures with crystalline eyes watched from the trees. By midday, the air had grown thicker, not from heat, but from something deeper. History, presence. The Ember Grove was near. Kalira stopped at a shrine marked by 2 curved blades embedded in stone. She knelt, touched her fingers to the runes carved into their hilts, and whispered words too old for translation. Connor watched her in silence. She rose slowly. From here on, we speak only truth. No armor, no defense. The grove hears more than words. He nodded. Understood. They entered together. The Ember Grove wasn't a grove in the earth sense. It wasn't trees and birds and sunlight through branches. It was something older, a living structure of flame-forged crystal growing in a spiral from the ground, forming chambers without walls and ceilings that shimmered like molten glass. The heart of it was a circle of flame. Not fire in the traditional sense, but heat shaped into memory. It danced across the floor in thin lines that shifted like script, writing and rewriting itself in response to emotion. As they stepped inside, the doors vanished. There was no way back, only forward. The first room showed them a memory, not theirs. Kalira gasped. Projected in a glowing mist before them was a woman with her face, older, regal, standing at the head of an army. At her side, a man who looked almost exactly like Connor, taller, grayer, but unmistakably kin. Their ancestors, she said softly. Yeltha and Harun, the first bonded pair of House Saren. Connor stared. He's human. Impossible. Humans weren't discovered until 500 years after Yeltha's reign. The memory pulsed, and the man turned, kissed Yeltha's forehead, and whispered something. The grove translated it aloud. We were always meant to burn together, even before the stars knew our names. Connor's skin tingled. Kalira looked shaken. This is why the blade accepted you. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The grove shifted. The second room was harder. It showed his memories, his first deployment, the jungle war, his squad falling around him, the orbital evac that came too late, the blood on his hands, the way he stopped sleeping for months. Kalira watched silently. Then it showed her memories, her mother's death, the slow poisoning of her house, her siblings exiled one by one. The night her father fell during the border rebellions, the moment she swore to hold their legacy or die with it. Connor reached for her hand. She took it. The grove pulsed. In the third room, the air changed. Cooler, calmer. The flame lines shifted into a pool of molten glass, reflecting both of them. But as they stepped closer, their reflections began to warp, not into monsters, but into possibilities. One showed them fighting side by side, older, battle-worn, but victorious. Another showed them walking different paths. Kellyra alone, standing before a crumbling house, Connor in orbit, expression hollow. A third showed them with a child. Violet skin, copper eyes, laughing in a field of red grass. Kellyra stared at that image the longest. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. When she turned to him, her eyes shone with something that wasn't just pride or fire, but hope. Real, terrifying, beautiful. Connor, she whispered, what do you want from me? He didn't hesitate. To walk forward, with you, wherever that leads. The grove heard. The flames shifted into a spiral and lifted. A wind circled them, gentle but full of charge. In a voice that echoed from nowhere and everywhere, the grove spoke. Accepted, bonded, remembered. The exit opened behind them. They left hand in hand. No words, only breath, and silence that felt sacred. That night back in the fortress, a feast was called. Not formal, not political, just the inner circle. Elders, allies, warriors loyal to House Saren. Even Maroon was there, arms still in a sling from their bout, raising a glass to Connor. You did well, human. Connor grinned. Next time, I go easier. You say that now. Kellyra's voice broke through from behind. No next time, trial's done. He's proven. Maroon lifted a brow. The grove accepted? Connor nodded. Said we were remembered. Whatever that means. The warrior's expression turned reverent. It means you're not just chosen. You're returned. A fire reignited. Connor tilted his glass. I'll drink to that. Later, alone in her chambers, Kellyra stood before the same mirror her mother once used. Connor entered without knocking. They didn't need permission anymore. He watched her for a moment. You were right, he said. That grove, it saw everything. And still let us leave. Maybe it didn't let us. Maybe it wanted us to. She turned. Why? He shrugged. Because some fires refuse to die. She stepped closer. And some bonds aren't accidents. Their hands met. No ceremony this time. No trials. No pressure. Just two souls that had walked through war and memory and still reached for each other. She whispered something in the old tongue. He didn't need a translation. And when she leaned in this time, it wasn't to test. It was to trust. The morning after the grove accepted them, the fortress of House Saren was unnaturally still. Not quiet. Silence was expected in the early hours. But this was a different stillness. Like the air had thickened. Like every stone was listening. Connor Graves sat in the war garden, where Kellyra's ancestors had once trained beneath a bloodleaf tree that bloomed only during crisis. The petals were open now, glowing faintly. He sipped a bitter brew and tried not to notice that the servants had started bowing deeper. Not just to Kellyra, but to him. Since their return from the grove, the whispers hadn't stopped. They said he was a reincarnation, a remnant returned. They said the flame of inheritance had chosen him. They said a prophecy. Connor had never liked prophecy. He liked plans. And in all his plans, becoming the symbolic cornerstone of an alien bloodline had never ranked high. Kellyra appeared without sound, dressed in ceremonial armor, but with her long hair still loose, a combination he was starting to understand as uniquely hers. Regal, untamed. She handed him a scroll. He frowned. You want me to read ancient poetry before breakfast? It's not poetry. It's scripture. Even better. She sat across from him, one leg folded under her, her expression unreadable. Open it. He did. The scroll was old, not aged like something left in a drawer, but ancient like something pulled from the bones of the planet. It pulsed faintly, his fingertips tingled. The words were written in twin languages, one angular and burning, the other soft and flowing, but the scroll translated for him as he read. When fire mingles with that which knows no flame, a child shall be born under twin moons, of blood not written in the stars. From this union of flame and void shall rise a voice to bind the clans. Connor looked up slowly. Is this what I think it is? Kalira nodded once. The prophecy of the second flame. He set the scroll down carefully. You think it's talking about us? We didn't, at first. But then the grove opened, and you were accepted by the blade. And the bloodleaf tree began blooming weeks ahead of the war calendar. Convenient coincidences. She stared at him hard. I'm pregnant. He froze. The words didn't register at first. They were too big, too heavy, too impossible. What? I'm carrying your child. The world tilted. How? Are you sure? The palace healers confirmed it this morning. Twice. He swallowed. But we're not even the same species. The blade knew something our scientists didn't. He stood up, pacing. You said this wasn't about that. That we were bonded by law, by tradition, by spirit, not by biology? He turned to her. Kalira, this changes everything. She stood too, eyes blazing. You think I don't know that? The wind kicked up through the garden, swirling red petals around them like falling sparks. I thought the grove was the test, he muttered. I thought we were done. This is the real test, she said softly. He met her gaze and saw it, the fear behind her fire. Not of him, of what the world would do to them. What do you need? He asked quietly now. She exhaled, stepped closer. We need to make a choice. What choice? Do we announce it? Connor hesitated. Is that safe? Safe? No. But nothing important ever is. The announcement went out at dusk. It wasn't a speech. It wasn't a public show. It was a flame beacon, lit in the highest tower of House Saren, fueled by Kalira's blood and a drop of Connor's. The fire burned violet and gold. Every house in the capital saw it. By morning, emissaries arrived. Some came with gifts. Some came with questions. One came with a blade. The emissary from House Valen was tall, thin, and veiled. She carried a scroll in one hand and a curved dagger in the other. Ceremonial, Connor was told. Kalira accepted the scroll, read it once, and handed it to him. The words were simple. We recognize the union, but question the child. Let the blood decide. They want a test, Connor said flatly. Kalira nodded. A proof of lineage, a blood right. If the child's blood sings to the stone of lineage, they will acknowledge his inheritance. And if it doesn't? She was quiet. He looked at her. Kalira, if the blood is false, she said finally, they will demand the child be given to the temple, removed from both bloodlines, erased. He went cold. No, she met his eyes. That's why we cannot fail. The temple of lineage was older than the clans themselves. Built into the hollow of a dead volcano, it pulsed with geothermal light. The walls were alive with glowing script that shifted depending on who entered. Ancestors, it was said, spoke through the heat, judged through the fire. They did not speak aloud once inside. Kalira led him through the winding corridors to the heart chamber, a circular space surrounding a single stone pedestal. Atop it, the stone of lineage, a crystal spire humming with untold names. Connor watched as Kalira stepped forward and placed her palm on the surface. The spire flared violet, then deep red. Her lineage, pure, proud, ancient. Then she stepped back. Now him. He stared at the crystal, heart pounding, and placed his hand. Nothing happened. Then a flicker, gold, and then blue, and then both. The room trembled. The spire split, not cracked, not broken, but opened. Inside, the flame burned violet and gold, entwined, perfectly balanced. Kalira gasped. Connor stumbled back. Then the spire began to sing. Not music, memory. Flame and void. Written and unwritten. The child shall carry the voice of unity. The temple guardians bowed. The emissary who had doubted them dropped her dagger. No one questioned again. Back at the fortress, the world changed. Clans once neutral pledged allegiance. Houses once enemies offered alliance. But not all. House Dareth, the militant extremists of the southern plateau, refused. They called the child an abomination. They burned their ancestral trees in protest. and they sent a message. We reject the prophecy. We reject the flame. The child will not live. Connor read it, then tore it in half. Kalira didn't speak. She just summoned her war advisors and began planning for war. That night, Connor sat by the fire in Kalira's private chamber. She leaned against him, silent. His hand rested on her belly. He hadn't felt movement yet, but he felt something new, something terrifying, something sacred. He'll have your eyes, she whispered, or your fire. He'll have both, she said, and he'll need it. Connor kissed her temple. Then we'll teach him. She looked up at him. You weren't chosen just to protect me. I know. You were chosen to protect us. I know. And in that moment, neither of them feared the prophecy, because they were the prophecy. And fire, once lit, does not ask permission to burn. The sun did not rise over Nerith Prime that morning. Instead, it bled. A crimson haze hung low over the capital spires of Virakai, casting long shadows over the stone ramparts of House Saren's fortress. The sky churned with volcanic ash from a southern ridge flare. Not an uncommon event, but its timing now felt like a warning. Connor Graves stood at the edge of the North Terrace, fingers wrapped tight around the banister carved with old battle runes. His jaw was tense, his breath fogged in the cold mountain air, even though sweat clung to the back of his neck beneath his armored collar. Something wasn't right. He felt it in his bones. Not from the planet, from the people. The political whirlwind following the lineage trial had not calmed. If anything, it had sharpened. In the 2 weeks since the Stone of Lineage confirmed their unborn son as legitimate, not just in spirit, but in prophecy, support for House Saren surged. Lesser houses realigned. Neutral clans sent envoys. Some even whispered of Kalira as the future high matron of all Nerith. But the loyalty came at a price. Unease brewed beneath every tribute. Respect curdled into fear, and fear became whispers about the child, about what he might be, about what he might replace. That morning, a courier arrived from House Dareth bearing a sealed crate and no words. It was carved from scorched obsidian and bound with silver thorns. On its surface, a single symbol was etched in dried blood, a broken cradle. Kalira opened it in the war room with 4 guards present and a priestess chanting words of protection. Inside was a doll, hand-carved, painted with violet skin. Its head was cracked. Its eyes were human. Kalira didn't speak for an hour. She stood unmoving before the fire, the half-smashed doll cradled in her palm like a blade. Her eyes burned, but she didn't blink. Connor dismissed the guards, locked the door, and approached slowly. Kalira. She didn't look at him. I know what this means, she said quietly. They want me to miscarry. He tensed. We'll protect you. They won't come with armies, not yet. They'll come with silence, poison, shadows, old rites designed to unsettle a woman's blood and break the child from within. Connor's fist clenched. Then tell me how to fight them. Her gaze lifted to his, sharp as flint. You already are, just by standing here. But it's not enough. She stepped closer, pressing the doll into his hand. No, it's not. They reinforced her quarters that night, not visibly. No extra guards at the door, no obvious patrol routes. That would signal fear. Instead, they activated the ancestral wards, invisible threads of old energy woven into the stone, pulsing only under threat. The blade of Eldara was mounted above her bed, where it vibrated faintly like a heartbeat. Kalira lay on her side beneath embroidered sheets, her eyes half-lidded but awake. Connor sat beside her, armored and alert, his plasma sidearm resting on the nightstand. I can't sleep, she murmured. I know. Do you think he can feel it? Connor looked down at her belly. Her pregnancy had begun to show, subtle but undeniable, a soft curve beneath her resting hand. He'll feel that you're fighting, he said. That's what matters. Her fingers found his. Do you think he'll look like you? Maybe, but I hope he has your spine. She smiled faintly. That might doom us all. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. Then we deserve it. The attack came on the 5th night. Subtle, cruel. A servant brought tea, imported from the south, a rare blend from House Thiessen, known for easing pregnancy pains. Kalira's midwife inspected it. No poison detected. Still, something in the scent felt wrong. Connor intercepted the cup before Kalira drank. He sipped it himself, then collapsed. The poison was delayed action, not lethal but crippling, a neurostatic blend designed to paralyze the muscles below the rib cage and induce rapid blood cooling. In humans, it wasn't fatal. In a Nerethian pregnancy, it could have ended everything. He woke an hour later in the healer's wing. Kalyra sat beside him, unharmed. The midwife had acted quickly. The tea had been traced, not to House Thiessen, but to a servant who no longer existed in the fortress registry. They had been infiltrated. The unborn heir had survived. Barely. Connor insisted on returning to duty the next day. His muscles still twitched from the aftershocks. His grip strength was off, but he refused to show weakness. Not now. Kalyra didn't argue, but she did something else. She called for the Mirror Circle. The Mirror Circle was a tradition as old as the clans, a private, intimate assembly of matriarchs, seers, bloodbinders, and bondmates. It wasn't a war council. It wasn't a legal court. It was older than both, a place where truths were spoken without politics, where oaths were made in fire and tears. Kalyra entered the circle barefoot, her robes unarmored. Connor walked beside her, unarmed for the first time since the trials. The room itself was circular, with 12 mirrored panels spaced evenly along the perimeter. Each reflected not the present, but potential. In one, Kalyra was shown alone, childless, a queen of ash. In another, Connor saw himself dying in a field of red sand, his son holding his broken weapon. In a third, they saw their child, older now, standing between two armies, both lowering their weapons. A voice echoed from the center mirror, though no figure stood there. "What name do you claim for the child?" Kalyra stepped forward. Her voice did not tremble. "Theon, of the line of Saren, son of Kalyra and Connor of Earth. Flameborn." The mirrors pulsed. A second voice, older, deeper, asked, "And what price are you willing to pay for his future?" Connor stepped forward. "Whatever it costs." The mirrors shifted. One cracked, another turned dark, but the one before them flared gold and violet, and the voice said only, "Then be ready." 2 days later, a bounty was placed on their child's name. It wasn't official. No clan took credit, but the underworld of Virakai stirred. A whisper in the alleys, a coin minted with a broken star, a promise, end the prophecy, end the child. Connor saw the alert on his data slate. He didn't hesitate. He armed himself, then went to Kalyra. "We need to move." They retreated into the mountains, not as fugitives, but as shadows. Old tunnels carved beneath the fortress led to an ancient refuge, the Heart Cavern, where flame crystal veins pulsed with ancestral light. It was here that Kalyra's great-grandmother once hid during the Searing Rebellion. It was here Kalyra would wait out the storm. She did not protest, not when Connor arranged silent perimeter drones, not when he brought 3 elite guardians who had sworn life oaths to him during the trials, not even when he took the first watch alone while she slept. She only whispered one thing before sleep claimed her. "Promise me you won't let him be born into war." Connor sat beside her and said nothing, because he couldn't promise that, but he could promise he'd be there. Days passed, then a week. Kalyra's health stabilized. The child grew stronger. But the news from the city worsened. An uprising flared in the outer districts. Not a full revolt, but coordinated attacks against House Saren sympathizers. 3 allied clans had their forges sabotaged. A supply caravan vanished en route to the north. House Dareth had gone silent. Worse, the prophecy was being challenged. A rival seer from House Karash declared a countervision. She claimed the child was not the Flameborn, but a wound-bearer, one who would split the clans, not unite them. It was a lie, but lies had power, especially when backed by fear. On the 12th day, Kalyra stood in the cavern and pressed Connor's hand to her belly. "Feel." He did. A flutter, then a kick. He smiled. "He's strong," he said. "No," she corrected. "He's alive, despite it all." Connor kissed her, not gently, not fiercely, just wholly. And for that moment, the world beyond the stone didn't matter. Only what they were protecting, only what they had created, together. They emerged from the mountain 2 days later, not in retreat, in defiance. Kalyra returned to the fortress in full ceremonial war dress, her stomach now visibly curved beneath golden armor. Connor walked beside her, blade of Eldara in hand. The people saw them. and the whispers began again, not of fear, but of fire. And in the ancient tongue of the flamebound, the phrase echoed from balcony to courtyard. The unwanted heir walks beneath the sun, and the clans began to choose. The first blade didn't come from the front. It never does. It came at night. Quiet, clean, without war drums, without banners, a whisper, a flicker of movement in the reflection of a ceremonial basin. Kalira turned just in time to see her chamber guard fall without a sound, a silver dart embedded in his throat. The assassin was already mid-lunge, cloaked in dermal camouflage, body flexing with impossible grace. Kalira didn't scream. She reached for the blade of Eldara hanging over her bed, heart surging, fire singing in her veins. And then the assassin stopped, frozen, held. Connor stood behind him, one hand wrapped tight around the attacker's forearm, the other driving a vibro knife into the base of the skull with surgical precision. The body went limp. It hit the ground with a wet thud. Kalira stared, breathless, not at the body, but at Connor. Blood splattered across his face. His eyes were cold. The room was silent, save for the distant chime of an ancestral clock. Connor exhaled once and muttered, "They've begun." In the 23 days since the bounty was whispered through the black markets of Virakai, the political tide had fractured into two camps, those who feared the child and those who feared the world without him. What neither camp expected was how silent the attackers would be. There were no armies on horseback, no planetary sieges, just shadows, hired ghosts, blades in the dark, the kind of war Connor Graves had known all too well in his Earth years, back when he worked black ops contracts in unregistered systems for clients who didn't want clean hands. This wasn't about honor anymore. This was about extermination. By dawn, the body had been incinerated. Kalira ordered a full lockdown of the upper citadel. Priestesses wove protection wards into the stone arches. Healers reinforced her quarters with sigils laced in old blood. But Connor knew it wasn't enough. They didn't breach the perimeter, he told her, pacing the war room, arms folded tight. They walked through it. Kalira's hands trembled, not from fear but fury. A traitor? Not just one. This was coordinated, professional. They knew our rotation schedule, the sigil frequencies, the ward gaps. He paused. This wasn't hired muscle. This was elite. She met his gaze. Then we cut the head. Connor's eyes narrowed. How deep are you willing to go? Kalira stepped forward, her voice low, deadly. To the root, even if the root bleeds royal. 3 hours later, the council chamber of House Saren was cleared of all but three. Connor, Kalira, and Maroon, her trusted combat general and one of the only surviving veterans of the border rebellions. Maroon bowed deeply, his four-jointed arms crossed in deference. Kalira wasted no time. Activate the ghost ledger. He blinked. My lady, that record is not a request. Maroon turned and withdrew a small crystalline disk from a locked vault behind the dais. It shimmered with bio-encrypted runes that flickered when Connor stepped near. What's the ghost ledger? He asked. Kalira answered without hesitation. It's a list of every operative, exile, bounty hunter, and defector who has ever touched Saren blood and lived. Connor arched a brow. And it's legal to keep that? No, Kalira said. That's why we burned it. Or so they thought. They moved fast. Every name cross-checked. Every last known location pinged. And one name pulsed on the map like a heartbeat inside a bruise. Val Tren, former infiltration commander of the Saren Elite Guard. Disavowed, disappeared, rumored dead. Until 2 days ago, when he was spotted at a spice bar outside the lower gravity port in Viracai's slum sector, hiring off-worlders. Kalira turned to Connor. I want him alive. Connor didn't blink. I'll bring back what matters. He didn't take soldiers. Soldiers were for declarations. This was a message. Instead, he went with Velen, a silent ghost of a woman with obsidian eyes who once slit a senator's throat with a thread of silk, and 2 low-tier enforcers from Kalira's outer guard who owed him favors after he saved their sister during the caravan collapse. They moved like shadows, wore nothing that glinted, carried only what couldn't be traced. The city's slum sector, known as the Hollow Veins, was a labyrinth of melting metal, pulsing steam vents, and market stalls built from shipwreckage. The kind of place where names didn't matter and death wasn't a question, just a price. They found Val Tren in the back of a shuttered gambling den, surrounded by 3 bodyguards and a woman who didn't blink when a knife passed through her drink instead of the air. Connor entered alone. "You're early," Val said without looking up from his cards. Connor drew his sidearm and pressed it to Val's temple. "You're breathing. That's late." They didn't kill him, but they didn't ask politely either. By the time Val spoke, his voice trembled from more than pain. He gave them locations, names, and one confirmation that dropped Connor's stomach like a gravity malfunction. The order to eliminate the child hadn't come from House Dareth. It had come from inside House Saren. Kalira read the report twice. Then she sat back, eyes closed, and whispered, "Her." Connor stood beside her. "Who?" Kalira opened her eyes. "My aunt, Lareth Saren. She was once matron-in-waiting, before my father chose my mother." "She's blood. She's ambition." Connor's jaw tightened. "So we remove her," Kalira nodded. "But not by force." "Then how?" She looked at him, and for the first time since the Grove, there was hesitation in her voice. "We make her admit it." The trap was simple. Invite her to a private flame vigil, a sacred rite held once per generation to honor unborn heirs. No one refused such an invitation. To do so would be to publicly disown one's bloodline. Lareth came robed in silver, her hair braided with jeweled ash, her posture regal. She kissed Kalira's cheek, smiled at Connor, and stepped into the circle of sacred fire without fear. But fear wasn't the weapon that would undo her. Truth was. The ritual began, chants in the old tongue, offerings of iron and salt, a thread of blood from each living member of the house placed into the basin of inheritance. When the final drop touched the flame, the fire turned violet, then blue, then red, and Lareth screamed, not from pain, but from exposure. The fire, ancient and alive, projected her intent into the air like smoke turned memory. Everyone saw it, the contracts, the poisons, the letters to House Dareth, even the bounty. She was named unmistakable. And when she reached for her blade, Connor was already there. Steel met bone, and Lareth Saren fell, unmourned, unforgiven. The fire burned brighter that night, not in celebration, but in vigilance. Steel had come in the shadows, and they had met it with fire. But Connor knew the darkness wasn't gone. Only watching, only waiting. And as Kalira rested with her hand on her growing stomach, he sat at the edge of their chamber, watching the moonlit cliffs through the open arch, his blade across his lap. He didn't sleep. He didn't breathe easy, because the world didn't fear a child who was alive. It feared a child who might survive. It began with silence, not the sacred quiet of temple halls or the hush before a fire chant. No, this was the silence of something vast holding its breath, of predators cloaked in ash, watching the edges of light. It settled over the fortress of House Saren like a warning, and then came the pulse, not from within, but from beyond. A tremor in the ancient veins of the mountain, subtle, then rhythmic. Steel boots on stone, the march of thousands, and in the east, where the horizon should have gleamed with dawn's violet promise, a different light rose, red, smoke-choked, war-born. Connor Graves stood on the outer wall, visor drawn, breathing through the filtered layer of his helm. Below him, Kalira's army stirred into readiness, warbands arming themselves in disciplined silence, priestesses carving protection glyphs into the gates, couriers rushing between towers on hover pads that left trails of golden light in the early gloom. The siege had begun. No declaration, no envoy, just a single arrow fired at dawn, not to wound, but to announce. Kalira joined him on the battlements. She wore battle armor of deep obsidian, gilded with her house's ancestral flame sigil across the chest. It shimmered faintly, as if remembering bloodlines long dead. Her face was bare, regal, unreadable. Only her eyes betrayed the storm within. "How many?" she asked. Connor pointed across the ravine. "At least 15 warbands, 6 from Dareth, 4 from the broken clans. The rest are mercenary banners, probably off-worlders." She frowned. "Bastards for hire. The worst kind," she nodded once, "and the best to break." Below, the defenders fell into formation. The walls were shielded by ancient tech, stone-layered kinetic buffers powered by buried flame crystals. Enough to hold for 3 days, maybe 4, but not more. Connor knew it. And so did Kalara. "We have to evacuate the civilians," she said. Connor shook his head. "They'd be slaughtered in the pass. We can't fight with them here. I'm not proposing we run." She glanced at him, and for a moment the mask cracked. Not from fear, but from trust. "You have a plan?" Connor nodded. "I always do." The sanctuary protocol was old, forgotten even, buried in the deepest parts of the House Saren military codex, long before Kalara was born. Connor found it 2 nights earlier, tucked inside a half-erased file behind firewall encryption no one had touched in centuries. It was brilliant and brutal. A collapsible network of ancient escape tunnels, each rigged to detonate upon exfiltration, designed to act as both fallback and ambush. Most had been sealed since the Searing Rebellion, but Connor had spent the last 5 days clearing them, with only 3 people. Now the plan was simple. Let the enemy breach the outer defenses, draw them into the courtyard, then collapse the central chamber with them inside. Hard, final, and loud enough to be heard by every clan across the continent. "But you'll be inside the trap," Kalara said when he told her. Connor checked the charge on his plasma detonator. "I'll be out before the 4th pillar drops." "I don't like it. I don't like any of this." She stepped closer. "I can order you not to go." "You won't." She didn't. The siege began at mid-morning. A deep horn echoed across the ravine, vibrating the mountain itself. Then, fire. Missiles carved from bone and iron slammed into the outer shield, sending molten sparks cascading like dying stars. Cannons fired from ridgeline batteries. Kinetic rams smashed against the gates. The fortress groaned, but it held. For now. Connor led the fallback maneuver personally. As enemy troops surged across the bridge, House Saren's defenders retreated methodically. Not broken, not fleeing, but pulling, drawing the attackers deeper into the belly of the mountain. Kalara fought alongside her people, twin sabers flashing in figure-8 arcs, armor smeared with blood, unrelenting, radiant. The enemy pushed into the central courtyard by dusk. Flame banners snapped in the smoke. Screams rang through the air like shattered bells. And then, Connor detonated the courtyard's center column. Not the main charge, just a taste. The enemy halted, confused. Too late. The walls shifted. The floor buckled. And from the depths of the fortress, fire erupted. A wave of pressurized heat and stone collapsed the corridor behind them, sealing off retreat. The attackers turned to run, and found the Saren blades waiting. It wasn't a battle. It was a purge. When the dust settled, Kalara stood over the broken husk of Dareth's commander. Sword lodged in his throat, her breathing heavy but steady. Connor joined her, blood on his helm, plasma rifle still smoking. "Not bad for a first joint engagement," he said. Kalara glanced at him. "We're not done." He followed her gaze. Beyond the ridgeline, a second force moved. Bigger, heavier. That night, they met in the war chamber. Kalara stood with her command circle, armor still scorched. Connor leaned over the tactical map, tracing the enemy movements with a gloved hand. "They waited," he said. "Let us bleed on the first wave. Now they'll try to crush the survivors." Kalara frowned. "How long until their main force arrives?" Connor checked his slate. "Dawn." She nodded. "Then we fight again at first light." He hesitated. She noticed. "Speak." Connor looked up, jaw tight. "We can't hold the wall again." "So we fall?" "No," he said. "We vanish." The final part of the Sanctuary Protocol wasn't about escape. It was about rebirth. Deep in the mountain, beneath the oldest foundations of the fortress, a hidden chamber existed. Half legend, half ruin. Built as a last cradle of the bloodline. A vault, a temple, a womb. Kalara had only heard stories. But Connor had found the map, and a way in. "If they want the child," he said, "they'll search the keep, but we won't be here." "Where will we be?" Connor looked at her, and then at her belly, and then beyond the walls where stars blinked like gods with secrets. Exactly where they'll never look. By midnight, the civilians were evacuated through the mountain pass, guided by guardians wearing Connor's borrowed armor and voice patches to simulate his commands. A decoy. It worked. The enemy tracked the signal, followed the caravan, and missed the real move. Kalira, Connor, and a handful of flame guard descended into the under catacombs. The path was treacherous. Collapsing stone bridges, heat vents flaring, ancient bone relics embedded in the walls. But they reached it. The Vault of Bloodfire, a chamber older than the clans, carved with forgotten runes, lit only by the pulse of unborn flame, and in the center, a bed of stone wrapped in memory silk, waiting, safe, sealed. Kalira approached it, breath-catching. Connor held her hand. "I won't let them take this from us." She looked at him, fierce, exhausted, grateful. "I know." They slept that night for the first time in weeks. Not long, but deeply. And when Kalira awoke with a hand on her stomach and a tear in her eye, Connor didn't ask why, because he already knew. The child stirred, not from fear, but strength. Above, the fortress burned. Below, the bloodline endured. And all across Nareth, the clans whispered of something new. Not a rebellion, not a prophecy, but a reckoning. The fire in the vault burned blue, not warm, not angry, not wild, but ancient, like it had forgotten what heat was and remembered only purpose. It pulsed from the walls in slow rhythms, a heartbeat not bound to time, echoing across the stone chamber where bloodlines had once begun, and where, perhaps, one would now be judged. Connor Graves stood in the center of that flame-lit sanctum, shirt stripped down to the waist, breath shallow. His hands were bare, fingertips slightly scorched from where they had touched the ceremonial basin. He hadn't been asked to kneel. He hadn't been ordered to fight. But the room had called him, and Kalira had whispered only one word as he entered. Trust. Now he stood alone, waiting. Across the chamber, Kalira sat at the edge of the memory bed, her hand resting over the subtle curve of her belly, eyes locked on the center of the room. Her face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. She could not follow him. No one could. The trial by ancestors was not a rite of strength, nor blood, nor war. It was soul. It was legacy. And if he failed, the child would not carry the blessing of her lineage. Their bond would hold in law, but not in spirit. The clan would fracture. The fire would forget him. And the child might never be safe again. Connor's vision began to blur. Not from pain, from presence. The walls shifted. The blue fire stretched toward him, slowly, like fingers of memory reaching from the past. Symbols rose from the stone, not written, but lived, and began to circle him in silent arcs. He tried to step forward, but his feet no longer touched the ground. He floated, not up, not down, just away. The vault dissolved into mist, into colorless space, and then they appeared. Not all at once. Not like ghosts, like judges. Figures cloaked in silver flame, wearing no eyes, only crowns of bone and ash. Their faces were featureless, and yet he felt their scrutiny. The first one spoke, though no mouth moved. "You are not of the flame." Connor straightened his back. "No, you are not of the blood. No, you are not of the stars we remember." He hesitated, then said quietly, "Not yet." Silence. And then the second voice came, feminine, deeper. "Why do you claim what is not yours?" "I didn't claim anything," he said. "I defended someone I refused to see die. I picked up a blade, and the blade chose me. That was not permission." "No," Connor said, his voice steadying. "It was a challenge." The flames flared. The judges shifted. "Then prove you are more than coincidence." He was dropped into memory, not his own, Kalira's. He stood in a burning hallway. 10 years ago, the night her father died. Guards fell. Banners burned. Her scream echoed down stone. She was 12, and still she fought. With a wooden blade, she struck at the soldier who came for her with real steel. She lost, and yet she stood again, bloodied, shaking. He tried to speak to her, to reach, but the vision ignored him. He was not there to interfere, only to see. Another shift, a battlefield. Kalira, grown now, blood-soaked, kneeling over her dying sister. Her lips moved. "It should have been me." Connor turned, unable to look away. A moment later, the fire took him again. This time, it was his memory. He didn't expect that. Earth. War zone. The first mission he'd lost someone on. His team, his family. Gone because he second-guessed a call. He stood alone in the jungle fog, plasma burns still cooling, and the last thing he'd whispered to the empty air was, "It should have been me." The flame did not judge him for that. Instead, it brought him to a final memory. The moment he held Kalira's hand in the grove. The moment her fingers trembled and she let them. The moment he had been the shield, and she had chosen not to stand behind it, but beside it. The fire dimmed. The figures leaned closer. And this time, they did not question. They spoke. The flame does not choose. It remembers. And in you, it remembers something lost. You are not of us, but you are with us. And so, you may remain. Connor gasped. The chamber returned. His feet struck stone again. Kalira rushed to him. He fell into her arms. "You were gone for seconds," she whispered. "To you," he said. "I was gone for years." That night, the sky opened. A meteor, real or otherwise, streaked across the night in brilliant blue and gold. The priestesses called it the ancestors' mark. Connor didn't care. He just watched Kalira sleep, her breath slow, her body curved protectively around the unborn child they'd both nearly lost more than once. He had passed their test, but now came the harder one. Living it. The next morning, the war horns didn't sound, because the enemy camps outside the mountain had vanished. Not slaughtered, not beaten. Gone, deserters, surrendered, or simply undone. The story of the trial had spread. Somehow, no one knew how the word had escaped the vault, but the clans knew now. The ancestors had spoken, and their flame had chosen both. In the high chamber, Kalira stood before the assembly of surviving matriarchs. Beside her, Connor. At her side, the blade of Eldara, glowing with quiet power. In her voice, no tremor, only flame. "We are not divided by stars. We are not broken by fear. We are one, and the fire walks with us." And no one spoke against her, not this time. Later, in the quiet of the cradle chamber, Connor touched Kalira's stomach and felt a kick. She smiled at him through tears. "Did you hear them?" she asked. He nodded. "They said I don't belong." "But—" He looked her in the eye. "They were right." She blinked, startled. He leaned in and kissed her. "But they also said I'm welcome." Outside, the mountain fortress rebuilt itself slowly, stone by stone. But inside, a different kind of rebuilding began. Of hope, of legacy, of family. The trial had ended, but their life, the one worth fighting for, had only just begun. The high peaks of Nereth Prime caught the first light of dawn like blades bathed in fire. But it wasn't the light that stirred House Saren awake. It was the silence that followed. A silence too deep, too still. The kind of silence that only came when something ancient was watching or waiting. Connor Graves stood at the apex of the southern spire, his armor unlatched at the neck, letting the cold bite his skin. The wind carried whispers again, not voices, but changes in the atmosphere, fluctuations in the resonance of the flame crystals buried deep beneath the stronghold. He'd learned to trust those vibrations, to feel them, to hear what Kalira had always known. The world was breathing around them, and today its lungs felt tight. Kalira joined him minutes later, draped in her mother's red ceremonial cloak, her hair unbound and braided only with the single silver thread that marked a bearer mother of an heir. Her steps were light, but her presence was weight. "Another disturbance?" she asked. He nodded, eyes on the horizon. Movement in the sand vein tracked. 2 suns rising. Her lips tightened. "Not natural." "No." She turned to him. "Then we go." He raised a brow. "You're 7 months pregnant. And I'm still faster than your top guards." He smiled faintly. "I wasn't going to stop you." She touched his cheek gently. "I know." The sand vein tract was a dead zone. Or it was supposed to be. A scar across the planet's surface left over from a failed terraforming attempt centuries ago. No water, no wildlife, and no reason for any sane being to go near it. Except now, it was glowing. Not faintly, but blazing. 2 perfect circles of golden light spiraled upward into the clouds. Twin pillars that bent the sky itself. From a distance, it looked like the planet had grown a second sun, smaller, more intense. and Connor felt it the moment they crossed the ridge. The child kicked inside Kalira's womb. Hard. "What the hell is that?" he asked. Kalira's eyes narrowed. "Not flame." "Then what?" "Something older." The descent was treacherous. Ash winds roared against their armor. The terrain warped with each step, like the land didn't remember how to stay solid. Time felt uneven. Seconds stretching, others collapsing. At the center of the spiral, they found it. Or rather, her. She knelt atop an obsidian dais, robes whipping in the windless air, her hair gray and silver, eyes as white as the moon's. A seer, but not of this era, not of this world. Her voice came without breath, without sound. "The blood is converging." Kalira stepped forward, hand on her abdomen. "You feel him. He is not just yours." Connor bristled. "What does that mean?" The seer didn't look at him. "You are more than Earth. She is more than Nerith. Your son will not belong to either." Kalira's voice turned sharp. "Then to whom?" The seer smiled. "To the blood of two sons." They left the tract in silence. Behind them, the spirals collapsed into dust. But the air had changed. The sky now shimmered faintly, as if some unseen veil had been torn. And everywhere they passed, people stopped and stared, because Kalira was glowing. Literally, her skin shimmered with golden veins of light, flickering beneath her collarbones, across her throat, around the child. Connor kept his hand on his weapon the entire way back, not because of danger, but because the world now saw too much. Back in the fortress, the high matriarchs demanded an audience. They filled the flame circle with ceremonial banners and their coldest expressions. Kalira stood before them, unflinching. But this time, they didn't question her. They questioned the child. If he is not fully of Nerith, what will he become? What laws will he obey? What gods will he answer? Connor stepped forward, and they turned to him with barely concealed contempt. But he didn't flinch. He simply said, "He'll answer to what we teach him." "And what if that's not enough?" Connor's voice was quiet but edged. "Then we'll teach him again." Kalira added, "You fear what he might become, but the only danger is what you make him." The matriarchs fell silent, and in that moment, something shifted. Not in law, not in war, but in faith. That night, Kalira couldn't sleep. The light beneath her skin had faded, but the feeling lingered. A sense of watching, of destiny pressing too close. Connor sat beside her, tracing slow circles across her back. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He looked at her. "What?" "This. Us. Him." He pulled her closer. "No." Even quieter. "Even if he's not what we expected?" He smiled softly. "Neither were you." She laughed once, then wept, and he held her until morning. The next week passed in blur. Allies arrived from unexpected places. Old enemies sent envoys with cautious respect. And one night, an Earthship entered orbit unannounced. A delegation from EarthGov. Connor met them on the landing pad, armored and unyielding. The lead envoy wore a pristine white jumpsuit and an expression like a man trying not to sweat. "We received transmissions," he began, "about the child." Connor folded his arms. "You didn't send a message first." The envoy glanced around. "We wanted to confirm the situation discreetly. That's what people say when they come to steal something." "Steal? No, we just want to study." Connor stepped forward. The envoy stopped talking. "Leave," Connor said. "But the child is not yours." Earth left. Quietly. Quickly. They wouldn't forget, but they wouldn't return soon. A month before the birth, Kalira entered the final stage of preparation. She would be sealed within the chamber of flame until delivery. A rite of protection, of transition. No one could join her, not even Connor. But he remained outside the door. Every day, every night, waiting. Inside, Kalira dreamt of stars, of fire, of a child with eyes like hers and his, and of two suns colliding, not in destruction, but in fusion, and something new born from the light. On the 39th day, the flames erupted, the mountain roared, and the child came into the world screaming, not in fear, in declaration. And across Nerith, the sky broke into light. Two suns rose, but only one was real, and the other, was born. Part 10. When the stars called him by name. They named him Taran. It meant light of fire and sky in Kalira's tongue. But Connor called him son. The first time he held him, the boy was wrapped in silks that shimmered with ancestral heat. His tiny hands curled around nothing. Then something, Connor's finger. And he didn't cry. He stared, eyes wide, unblinking, as if he already knew who they were. And maybe he did. Kalira was too weak to speak for a day after the birth. But her silence wasn't emptiness. It was reverence. She watched her son as if she had seen the end of the galaxy and found something more eternal in the curl of his nose, the weight of his breath. She didn't smile. She breathed. And the breath sounded like peace. But peace was never meant to last. Not in this life, not in theirs. Not when the stars had already whispered his name before he ever drew one. The signs began on the seventh night. Taran would stir, restless, eyes glowing faint gold in the dark. Both eyes, no matter how dim the room. Flame priestesses noted it with curiosity, healers with fear, and the elder seers began whispering in corners, quoting things from scrolls buried so deep they'd been scorched to hide from memory. Then on the 14th day, the fire in the Hall of Memory relit itself without hands, and when asked who had passed, no one had, except Taran had touched the pillar, just once, and the fire answered. Connor didn't pretend to understand all of it. He only knew what he saw. His son was aware, not precocious, not advanced, but ancient. He cried when stars blinked out of the sky. He laughed before storms arrived, and he spoke his first word. Not mother, not father, but return. Return to what? That was the question. And it found its answer in the form of a ship, not from Nerith, not from Earth, but from deep, uncharted space, unmarked, silent, and glowing faintly in twin tones, one of Earth alloy, one of Nerith flame. Connor stared at the orbit data for hours. No transmissions, no threats, just presence. It did not move, it did not scan, it simply waited. Kalira stood beside him in the command chamber. Her voice was steady. It's here for him. Connor didn't respond. He didn't need to, because Taran was already awake and already walking. He was only 26 days old. The priestesses called it impossible. The scientists called it mutation. But Kalira and Connor both knew. It was invitation. A door had opened, and the stars were calling their son home. They debated, fought, screamed behind sealed walls. Kalira wanted to know what lay beyond. Connor wanted to refuse it, not because he didn't trust, but because he knew how stars burn the ones who reach for them too soon. Still, the truth came not from either of them, but from Taran himself. He walked to the console, placed his hand on the holomap, and whispered, "We go." And so they did. A single ship, 3 passengers, a star map burned into the sky. The journey was short, too short. Space bent in ways it shouldn't have. Stars passed out of order. Galaxies blinked and folded. And when they exited hyperspace, they were not near any star they recognized. Only a field of light, a nebula shaped like a spiral wound, and at its center, a construct, not a planet, not a station, something alive, carved from stone and stardust in time itself, and it opened for them. Inside, no voices spoke, no beings greeted them, but knowledge bloomed in their minds like fire catching dry grass. This was the forge of Biralan, a myth, a relic, a place said to birth those who could bridge the divide between stars, not born of war, nor peace, but choice. It had waited thousands of years for Taran. The chamber they entered was circular, massive. Stars spun above them like they were looking up through a living telescope. Kalira held her son. Connor stood beside them, and then Taran stepped forward, alone. His feet made no sound, his body still a child's, but his eyes burned with galaxies. A voice filled the chamber. No mouth, no tone, only understanding. The one who walks between has arrived. Let the cycle end. Let the bridge form. And from the floor, light erupted. Taran was lifted into the air, not pulled, not trapped, but lifted. And around him, projections spun of Earth, of Nerith, of thousands of other species. Some extinct, some not yet born, all converging. All tied, all waiting. Kalyra reached for Connor's hand, found it trembling. He didn't hide it, because he understood now. Terran was not prophecy, not weapon, not messiah. He was synthesis, a child of stars and blood and choice. And this place, this forge, was where he would choose. When Terran floated down, he looked smaller somehow, not diminished, refined. His eyes met theirs, and he spoke with a voice still high, still young, but now carrying a calm that silenced galaxies. "I'll return," he said. Connor stepped forward. "When?" Terran smiled. "When you're ready to meet me." Kalyra fell to her knees. "Terran," he placed a hand on her face, "I'll always be yours." And then he walked into the light and vanished. They returned to Nerith alone. Two passengers, one silence. But not grief, not sorrow, just awe. And a hope that refused to die. In the years that followed, peace bloomed across systems that had never spoken before. New accords formed. Earth and Nerith became allies. And Connor and Kalyra raised new children. Not replacements, but additions. Flame-born and free. But always on clear nights, Kalyra would look at the stars, and Connor would hold her hand, and both would feel it. A presence, watching, waiting, loving. Then one night, a quiet night, a whisper came through the forged crystal they kept sealed in their home. Just two words, but enough to shake them both to tears. "I'm ready." And they knew. Their son had become more than legend, more than air. He had become the bridge, the flame, the star reborn, and the stars called him by name.